welcome to Psychic Holistic Spotlight. I'm your host, Josie Way, and co-hosting with me tonight is Sherry Kitchanis and Bill Hannon. Our guest, once again, is Laura Joseph. Hopefully you will have caught our show previously. If not, Laura is a gifted healer, a gifted medium, an artist, a writer, a woman of all trades. We previously asked you how you got started, and it started young with you. When did you start doing healing work?
I would say probably close to 10 years ago.
And you started with Reiki?
I started with meditation, Reiki. I started experiencing, personally, not getting licensed, but experiencing personally acupuncture and searching out other holistic modalities. And most recently, I've added Tai Chi. I'm starting to learn some Tai Chi now, too. So, and Reiki incorporates even Qigong. I mean, if you forget, there's a lot of overlap. So there's a lot of Qigong, Tai Chi as well that I'm doing now as well. Yeah,
because, I'm seeing more modalities out there. Sherry and I practice magnified healing, and we love it. But Reiki's been around for a very long time.
Yes.
And but only recently rediscovered.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, what was the jumping off point for you? You say about 10 years ago you started the healing work. What sparked that?
I guess coming from a domestic violence relationship, as well as working and growing up in the healthcare field, I started seeing a separation in self. So when it came to my normal life, I felt like I was one person. When it came to anything that had to do with my abuser or court or anything that had to do with that arena, I felt like I started seeing another person emerge. And the traditional healthcare wasn't helping. Not only was it not helping, but it's also used against you in the court of law. So, which then what that does is it inflates your symptoms more. So instead of healing, you're being re-victimized. So I, started to go through various spiritual churches. I started realizing and feeling and seeing how connected I was, or reconnecting, I should say, and really trusting spirit. So it was more or less a journey of partnering with spirit and letting spirit guide me. I made a commitment to myself that I stopped listening to spirit, and it got me a very abusive person in my life. And so I made a commitment to myself that I would never stop listening to spirit again. Or my gut.
Well, that's how the human organism internalizes and recognizes on a very basic level is the core, your gut feeling. And the more you trust that and realize that it's steering you right, I find that it's helpful if you say thank you and send me some more info. So absolutely.
I mean, I've seen in the beginning, I felt like I was kind of unsure. I did some things at various shelters, not knowing if it was going to work or not. I only went based on my own accord. And then so when people were reporting back to me positive experiences, I felt like it just added confirmation, because again, as victims of abuse, there's a trust issue. And sometimes it's even a trust with self. We start questioning trust with self because of, depending on the skill of the abuser, even sabotages that as well. So it became a dual thing in the beginning for me, in recognizing, wow, it was like almost like this really works. But even though cognitively I knew it worked, but to have that validation was very empowering. But not only that, what became even more empowering was my personal situation in my relationship, where my abuser kept wanting to take everything and strip me from everything. It became empowering that when I started making a difference in other people's lives, it was something he couldn't take away from me. So that's where I regained my power.
Okay, so that's a good, solid reason, because you were getting not just affirmation, but
Well,
you were actually
positive
getting
feedback.
a good, strong foundation for yourself to stand on your own 2 feet.
Absolutely.
And that allows you to be in your power again.
Absolutely. It's been a journey. I feel like I'm still, it's like they say, I grew up in healthcare, and they say they call it practicing medicine for a reason. I feel like I'm still learning. I'm still growing. It's still, and
Right.
I mean, I've spoken, I've done a lot of lectures on this, and I have a book that I'm trying to put together on healing trauma through spirituality.
Right.
So,
Well, it's interesting also that you mentioned, not just the court system, and we touched on that, and also the fact that you're dealing with somebody else who, for some reason, seems to have so much power over you. You just look back at when you were 5 or 6 years old, and your mom used to tell you, you go tell your brother that you're not my boss.
right.
And,
Well, they have a term for that kind of abuse. They call it gaslighting. So,
Gas what?
gaslighting. So with gaslighting, it starts out very subtly, and for anybody who wants to know really what gaslighting is, I recommend they see the 1944 version of the movie Gaslight with
Yeah.
Ingrid Bergman.
yeah, I haven't seen it. I have no idea what you're talking about.
It's a form of brainwashing, but what happens is when you're in an abusive situation, it starts off very subtly. So like in my case, it would start off after I said I do, all of a sudden the cat's not allowed on the sofa. Then I would go from, and of course, I'm not going to argue over something like that.
No.
But then what happens is they up it. Now it's, I'm going to get my car. We'll get out of the driver's seat, and you go over there, and I'll drive. Well, I'm already in the car. No big deal. Just get in. Well, no, I want, and they would have a temper tantrum. I'm like, well, I'm not going to argue with that. Okay, you drive. But then what they do is then they start escalating it. So it happens gradually over the years, and then it would go from that to, because I owned real estate before I got married. Then it would be, well, I'm the man of the house. You need to put the house in my name so I can, so they're slowly stripping one thing,
Right.
and they're escalating it each time.
Right.
So that's where gaslighting comes in, and the best way to see it is the movie Gaslight, to really see the brainwashing,
Interesting.
very
It's a
subtle
phenomenon.
brainwashing techniques that take place.
And manipulation.
It's the most skillful, and unfortunately, it's the most difficult to prove in the court of law. But it happens all the time, more than not. And it's pretty frightening. But unfortunately, victims are faced with a retaliatory court system, so they feel like right now they don't have a place to go, even though there are other resources. And what my goal is we always hear, let's break the cycle of violence or break the cycle of abuse. And my thing is, let's break the cycle of abuse through healing. We can't stop. Obviously, we're failing on prevention programs. We're failing at stopping the abuse. It's actually escalating at a phenomenal rate.
Right.
So the only way, in my opinion, to break it is to heal those cords.
Right.
Right.
Heal those cords. So you heal those cords, you heal your children, and you break it. That you break the cycle of abuse that way. And in my opinion, and the good thing is the CDC now has studies, everything from mindfulness-based meditation. There are scientific studies now even on Reiki as a benefit to treat things like anxiety, insomnia. There was a study on trauma victims in Sarajevo and the use of Reiki. So there's all kinds of studies now starting to come out with alternative therapies as a form of therapy that's viable.
Right.
Excuse me.
One thing I found interesting, and because you brought this up, I'm going to bring this up, is that for actual physical proof of that Reiki is effective, and basically any type of energy work over somebody, is that they, very simple test, they just drew some blood and they looked at it under dark field microscopy microscope, and they were able to observe the living blood. And then they did Reiki on them, and they were able to observe in the blood much more separation of red blood cells, no clumping, better oxygenation, because now the red cells were carrying more oxygen, and it seemed like everything in the blood was markedly much better. And so
That's one study I haven't heard of, so I'd love to see that one.
Yeah, right. Well,
Because I've seen a lot of studies, but I don't recall seeing that one. I would love to see that. I find it very intriguing.
I came across that about 10 years ago.
Wow,
Right.
Yeah.
that's awesome.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
There's a book I read recently about people who come from negative childhood experiences and all the trauma that they carry with them. And one of the most successful modalities was the mindfulness meditation, and several different variations of it.
Well, and actually the most...
Some yoga and mindfulness meditations.
The most pushed, there was a study called the ACE study that has now been picked up by the CDC. It's the longest ongoing study on ACE stands for adverse childhood effects.
Experiences.
And what that study is showing is the long-term effects of things like abuse and neglect. And what is being hoped is that judges that are not educated will hopefully, instead of, in colleges like, in Sandusky, instead of trying to quiet it and quell it, early intervention. So if we get the early intervention, then we don't have the high jailing. We don't have the, alcoholism and the drug addictions, or the re-victimizations, or the homelessness, and all these other things that come sometimes as an effect of the system failing to protect. The ACE study is the most credible study going on right now.
Yeah, and they're studying what will heal it.
Yes.
And the mindfulness and the yoga were some of the techniques. One of the other things was EMDR, but that's done with a doctor to help desensitize.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, mindfulness meditation is probably the most scientifically studied alternative modality there is. The U.S. Army, and I think in 2008, did a study on using meditation to treat PTSD in soldiers coming back from the war. So you even now have the military that's starting to embrace a lot of this stuff as well. To heal especially with PTSD, and I do see a lot of similarities with PTSD and victims of abuse with soldiers, as well as addictions with alcoholism and drug abuse.
Well, what happens with the ACE study is a lot of chronic and autoimmune illnesses, particularly chronic fatigue and all sorts of irritable stomach issues.
Well, and for those that don't understand that, the stomach issues is actually where we hold our emotions. One of the interesting things, and I've approached a lot of breast cancer, including the Ellie Fund and a few others on this one, is that personally I have seen a high linkage between breast cancer and abuse.
Yes,
so,
there is. Abuse and neglect.
Right, and I've been trying to figure out where's the scientific study to back up what I've been experiencing in my own office. And there isn't any. And but if you understand the Eastern medicine, this is all relational issues here. And the gut is the area where we hold all of our emotions. And I've worked with some batterers too, that have fallen into addictions. And I remember one got very kind of combative when I was saying we're going to work on certain things. Well, I'm not an alcoholic. I'm not this. I said that I'm not judging you. I'm not criticizing you. But your liver is what stores your resentment and your anger. And every time your ex pokes your buttons and goes bing, 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 your liver's sitting there going, hello, I want a beer, and not understanding the link there.
Right.
And understanding that our organs, sometimes when we have cravings or we have illnesses, it's paying attention. It goes to paying attention to our body, all the answers, all the healing. Our bodies are designed to heal itself. We've gotten away from that. Even our healthcare system has completely gotten away from it. And it's a matter of re-educating or as what I've been saying when I teach Reiki, it's rediscovering that our bodies are designed to heal themselves.
Well, the inflammatory response is actually a very healthy response, but it's not. But when you have trauma, it becomes chronic, and then organs start to fail because of that.
Well, it's
but it's part of your body's natural cleansing.
Right. Well,
to
it's
have an inflammation.
Well, it's
and flush it out.
Yeah, it's the fight or flight mode, and what happens when you have somebody that's in a fight or flight mode, like for instance, they're going through a legal action or they can't escape the abuse. The fight or flight mode is constantly heightened, so the adrenals and all the hormones that are triggering all the fight or flight hormones, stress hormones, are constantly, and it ends up depleting. So then you develop things like adrenal fatigue.
Right, you get run down. The immune system gets run down. Everything gets depleted.
Everything is connected.
Absolutely.
So whatever has happened to you emotionally will, if left unresolved, will affect your body.
Right. I say if the more you put it under the rug and pretend it's going to go away, I say, people say, oh, time heals all wounds. I go, no,
No, it
won't.
doesn't.
Well, that's why they call it dis-ease, because
Right.
you're not at ease,
Right.
right? And so the thing is that now you just have to find a way of understanding, oh, I'm not at ease. What can I do to be
Now
at
they
ease?
like to, now medicine likes to term it a syndrome
Well, of
rather
course.
than a disease.
Yeah, like, well, you were talking before about the irritable bowel. Well, you know, they never had a label on it before until they actually discovered something that worked for it. Now they got a medicine. What are we going to do with it? Well, we got to create a name for something.
Well, here's the other statistic. 70% of doctors' visits to a primary care physician are all due to stress-related illnesses. 70%.
That makes sense.
So, you know, the thing is we want to fix the healthcare system. I say I've got the cure for the healthcare system and the abuse system, you know, but it's a matter of Big Papa wanting to get involved. You know, it's changing our society and changing our methodology and recognizing certain things. And until that happens, we're going to keep breeding a sick society.
Well, again, you know, it comes back, and you brought up court a couple times, is that you have to realize who's the authority here.
Yeah.
It's you.
Right.
That's right.
You're the authority.
Yeah.
Right.
It's not somebody
Yeah.
saying this is the rules that you have to follow.
Well, when we go to a doctor, we hire them to help us. When we go to a Reiki practitioner, we're hiring somebody. We're not making them our God or our, you know,
Well, the word
telling us
doctor
what
just
to
means
do.
teacher.
Right.
That's all it means. It means teacher. But you know, the AMA, the union behind.
As a matter of fact, the AMA right now is actually trying to get holistic care, from what I understand, out of healthcare.
oh yeah,
They just, this is just recently, I believe, right, if I read it correctly, they're highly behind trying to get things like Reiki and meditation out of healthcare.
Well, it's proven to be effective, and therefore they don't want it to interfere with their money-making machinery.
Absolutely.
But that's why the chiropractors had to fight for recognition, was
Yeah.
because the AMA was the organization trying to discredit the chiropractors. So once the chiropractors said, again, you have no authority over us, all right, they turned around and they were able to defeat the AMA, and they got recognition.
Osteopaths face the same thing.
That's right. That was
I
before
come
the
from a family of
chiropractors. Right.
osteopaths.
and
Exactly.
acupuncturists have gone through that as well.
Right. Right. So the thing is, people just have to, again, understand who they are, stand on their own 2 feet. And
Right. Absolutely.
And become responsible for themselves and what they do.
Right. That's right.
You
And-
always have a choice.
I mean, you don't have to always be in defensive mode. I mean, that's
Right.
one of my characteristics. It doesn't
the-
matter what you throw at me, I just let it go through.
The insurance companies do have a strong say in
More so than the
what
doctors.
people, you know,
That's how it's gotten to this point, even now more so than the doctors.
than the doctors.
Right.
You know, they're very much in charge
But
of
I-
what we can and cannot afford to do.
Right.
Do you know, 10 years ago, it cost $10,000 a year for cancer. Now, it costs $10,000 a month for
No.
cancer treatment.
Unless you're on your deathbed, then it costs $10,000 a pill. But
Yeah.
but now let's get back into what we were talking before about your path here as far as the healing. You got into it, and what other modalities have you been able to expand?
Well, I mean, I'm trained in 2 different versions of Reiki. The Usui Reiki, which is more westernized,
Right.
As well as the Jikiden Reiki, which is non-westernized form, Japanese. I mean, my certificate and everything came from Kyoto, Japan.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm trained in Yuan energetics, which is a form of Chinese energy healing, which incorporates some Shaolin energy work, some chiropractic and other, muscle testing, things like that. I am certified I was trying to think. I do the meditations, and I'm starting to get into more recently. I'm learning to incorporate some Tai Chi and a little bit of yoga here and there, more into, because there's a lot of overlap.
Yeah,
and you're forgetting medical intuitive.
And the medical intuitiveness.
Well, that's what I was actually hoping you would get to.
Yes, it's the medical intuitiveness.
So how does
Tell us
somebody
more.
get to employ your medical intuitiveness?
It's very interesting because it just kind of happens when I started doing it. And, I'd be doing healing on somebody, or somebody would come to me for a reading, and all of a sudden I may be, linked to a certain area of their body. I had a woman sit down in front of me, and I kept feeling something with her thyroid, but I felt like her thyroid, the reason why it was off was because of vitamin D deficiency. And vitamin D deficiency is also linked to thyroid functioning. So, and I also felt some gut issues and some vitamin deficiencies. And after the healing work, she actually validated that she had all of these. So I had given her some, again, when you kind of tie the two together, then it's finding the root cause. Is these deficiencies more because of nutrition or what they're not eating, or is it more of maybe a side effect of a medication that they're taking, which people forget that numerous medications cause vitamin and nutritional deficiencies.
Right.
And especially in vitamins like vitamin B and magnesium, people that pop Tums all the time forget that they actually might be causing themselves a vitamin B deficiency, because vitamin B gets absorbed in the stomach.
Right.
And so, it just started happening. I just did not too long ago, a phone consultation from somebody that was referred to me in another state, because I've also been a proponent against the HPV vaccine. And they had the HPV vaccine at the age of 16 and are now 21 and called me for a medical intuitive evaluation because they were fighting their own doctors. They felt like they were just sitting there like a hamster on a wheel, just spinning because of the way the system is right now. And in the meantime, their health is chronically deteriorating to the point where they were in a wheelchair when they were highly functioning prior to the HPV vaccine. And now they've got certain doctors that are trying to tell them it's not HPV related.
Of course not.
And what kind of came out of certain things like that, for instance, might come up. I may pick up vitamin deficiencies. I might pick up things like that, maybe certain foods that might be triggering certain things. You can't change or alter what has already been done, but it's a matter of finding triggers that aren't going to worsen the symptoms that are already happening. So, or encourage, if I'm picking up certain areas of the body, to encourage them to see a particular type of doctor that might be in their area.
Yeah, I think that would be very beneficial. I could see that.
Yeah, so, I may pick up, and I think in this case, I said, you need to find somebody that specializes in delayed food allergies. Because that would be help, especially getting off of yeast products. Like I find a lot of people with yeast allergies is probably the most common delayed food allergy I find more than any other food group.
Don't tell that to the beer companies.
You'd be surprised. I love my Yuengling, so,
Yes, I understand.
But, so it just kind of comes in a whim, depending on, what I pick up. And sometimes in the medical intuitive, I had somebody that came to me for a reading, and all I kept picking up was milk and egg allergies on them, and respiratory issues. And
Well, yeah, the dairy will do that.
so, and that's when I kind of ask them, and if they're open, then what I typically do, sometimes I'll go into a discussion with them. Other times I'll just suggest, say, okay, there's too much going on here. I'm picking up testosterone deficiencies and vitamin D. And I would just jot down, and I say, I think we need to get a medical evaluation, but I would let the doctor what I suspect, so that way they have a heads up. And then they do the medical evaluation and take it from there. So it's kind of working like a triage with the medical team, with the ones that are open.
Do you have doctors that you refer to?
Yes and no. I usually sometimes will suggest, the only doctors that I really have, if you want to call them doctors, are more therapists that may specialize in domestic violence. Because I believe that if somebody is seeking psychotherapy, there's a lot of therapists that have zero training in domestic violence or how to work with a domestic violence victim. Unfortunately, I'm still looking for people that, because one of the doctors I used to refer to is now semi-retired.
I see.
So, and that's the old school physicians. So finding some ones that are open to alternative therapies and that can work with you without getting upset with you. You know, it could be challenging. But I usually try to say, you know, look, this is what you need to see this type of physician and to have maybe this looked into. You know, so I try to be very careful what I pick up and try to lead them more or less in the right direction so they know how to go with their health, if that makes sense.
Well, I think that's the reason why somebody would come to somebody like you, is just looking for guidance.
Yeah.
And, you know, you don't have to be specific, although you may be able to pick up on something specific.
Right.
You're just able to maybe direct them to a place where they can get some.
Yeah, and in some cases, like I'm working with somebody right now that's got chronic fibromyalgia, but I believe that the fibromyalgia is a symptom of a serious PTSD with repeated traumas in their life. So instead of targeting the fibromyalgia, this is where, again, the healing thing comes in, is that we're trying to work on healing those cords.
Right.
Whether or not we'll ever reverse the damage as a result of the fibromyalgia, who knows? It's getting the body, you know, I talk about being in health.
Right.
Being in good health and being healthy are two different things. Healthy is an illusion, but being okay with where you are at, whether you can change your illness or not, because some are irreversible, is a mindset. So changing that and healing the mind can sometimes reverse. Sometimes you can reverse the cancer, sometimes you can't.
All right, well, several times now you've mentioned the cords. Could you go into a little more depth of, so people can get at a more fundamental point of view as to why do you keep mentioning these cords?
Well, we all experience different things. With each experience is a seed that we plant. So, you know, an experience doesn't necessarily have to be so traumatic to have a big thing happen. It has to do with sometimes how we water that seed. I have a client that was referred to me by actually a physician because they were frustrated every time they were trying to work with their anxiety. Everything they tried wasn't working. And what ended up happening, they came to see me and I was stuck right here. What ended up happening was it was a secret over what somebody that they liked, somebody that had crossed over had experienced, and they were holding that secret in so much. And that person that crossed over actually suffered from severe anxiety. So it was watering. So she had that, if you want to call it, it's almost like an invisible cord to that person, and she was attaching those energies to her.
That's right.
So that's one aspect. Other cords could be whether it's child abuse, whether it's divorce, whether it's a flood. It's whether we release them or we harbor them.
Right. I can see that.
Archangel Michael's very good at helping cut some
cords.
of those cords.
Absolutely.
He's got a
But
big sword.
you need a lot of healing.
Yeah.
You need a lot of healing to go with it.
Right.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Once again, I want to say thank you for visiting us on Psychic Holistic Spotlight. Please come back and visit us again. We only have a few minutes left. Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Sherry. Thank you, Laura.
Thank you for having me.
And we look forward to having you back on the show sometime soon.
That would be great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Sherry, is there anything else?
Yeah, I was going to say, I wanted to add, well, this is an observation. Everyone is given titles, so like ADD or fibromyalgia. I really think a lot of times that people will own something that may not be true for them.
I
And
agree.
it's just given to them and they take ownership of it. And by taking ownership of it,
They're manifesting.
exactly.
They're manifesting.
So, I personally tend to avoid titles in particular because I choose not to manifest something I do not desire. And I talk in double negatives to avoid that to go into the subconscious because I want the alternative rather than the other. But fibromyalgia in particular, I believe, from my perception, and I've worked in for some medical professionals, it's the last, like, when they can't figure out what's going
Exactly.
on. You know what? You got fibromyalgia. Well, gee.
Absolutely.
And then people go, well, I have it. I must have it. So
Yeah, they did that with the chronic fatigue, too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was another
they do it
catch-all
with
phrase.
a lot of them. And it's unfortunate that people own those things and manifest. what they are.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Don't own it.
We faded to black.
Yeah.
Very good, everybody.